Hey seniors, this is Mrs. LeBar in the counseling office, and this is part two of our counseling presentation that we presented in the ELA classrooms. And I'm going to jump into more selective college applications, different types, and then specifically the common application and what to expect with that. So first, as we start, early decision versus early action, there's only about 5 different plans or different application plans, and most colleges are going to use regular decision and rolling admission, the first two on the left. And in fact, they don't usually even call them that. So really, when we're talking about selective admission, schools that get more applications than they have spots for, that's when you're going to start seeing words like early action and early decision and possibly restrictive early action. And so I want to take you through those really quickly. Early action is a way that students can apply early to a university, and then also in return they hear early back. So for instance, many early action deadlines are maybe November 1st, and then in return the colleges will issue their decision usually sometime mid-December, right before winter break. With early action, you can apply to as many early action schools as you want to. It's a non-binding commitment, and students have all the way up until May 1 of their senior year to decide if they want to attend that college, even though they applied early. The two plans that colleges use that are more restrictive are early decision and then possibly restrictive early action. I'm going to focus more on early decision because early decision is a binding commitment. And this is also an early application plan, but the student, by applying early decision, tells the college that that college is their first choice. You can only apply to one school early decision, and by applying early decision, the student says, you're my first choice, and if you accept me, I'm definitely coming. And so with an early decision application, students will not have the opportunity to weigh their offers, their measures, all the way up until May 1. The colleges will require them to make a commitment and deposit well in advance of May 1. And they're also saying that I want to go to your school. If you accept me, I'm definitely coming, regardless of finances and things like that. And because of the binding nature of this commitment, the student signs off on the fine print of early decision. The parents sign off saying, yes, we understand this is how it works. And then the counselor also signs off to say, yes, the parents and students understand that we've talked about they can't apply to more than one school early decision. And that's a part of the plan. Now, with early decision, you can apply to other schools' early action. You can apply regular decision, but just understand the early decision plan is that binding agreement. Restrictive early action is similar, and it's really only used in 1 or 2 schools across the country. And again, you could be restricted from applying ED early decision to another school, but in some cases you still have until May 1 to decide. So honestly, if it comes to early decision or anything that says restrictive, you just want to read the fine print and make sure you understand what you're getting into. And if you have any questions or concerns, you can always come and talk to your counselor here at Blue Valley West. Okay, so now we're going to move into the common application. The common application is like a universal college application that's utilized by over 500 colleges across the country. And so it does make it sometimes convenient to apply to several different schools. In general, it's a fairly involved application, and so sometimes students find it easier to use the application that's found on the school's website. But if you've already got a few colleges that use a common application, sometimes that does make the process easier. We're going to talk about some of the features in the common application. You can see that you're going to add in all of the colleges that you're going to apply to using the common application here, and they're going to show up on your dashboard. If you need to add more colleges, use the college search tab. And then the My Colleges tab, we'll look at this in a little bit, but it's going to show you all the different requirements for each of the colleges in your list. And then the Common App tab is information that's going to go to each of the colleges. So that's not really school specific. That's going to be where your demographic information, your school information, and your Common App essay is going to be. All right, so in that Common App tab, is largely that personal information. It's important that you put your Blue Valley West High School education information in there because that's how we get connected up to send transcripts and recommendations through our system in Naviance. Naviance connects to Common Application, and Common Application knows that we're a Naviance school. So you're going to enter all your information here. And again, all this information is going to go to each of the schools in your list. There is an essay that's under this tab as well, and this is the Common App Personal Essay. The essay is, you pick one of the essay prompts. It is no more than 650 words. I recommend that students type this up in Word or in Google Docs so that they can have different people proofread it. You can craft it as much as you want to and then just cut and paste into the Common Application essay. The good news is if you can utilize your essays and your short answers questions over and over again, or use it as a starting point for different colleges, then hopefully you don't have to create as much original content for the number of schools that you're applying for. Here in the middle, it's going to tell you which schools require the essay and which don't. With more and more schools coming on to the Common Application, I expect that the list of schools not requiring the essay will also grow as more schools utilize this Common Application. So checking college requirements, when we go to the My Colleges tab, this is where you can find out what each specific school needs. So under the main page, it shows you the variety of different things that each school is going to ask for if they need additional supplements, additional essays, those types of things. They're going to tell you what kind of recommendations they're looking for. If it says school report, that's short for the secondary school report. That's a form that all the counselors will fill out and attach with your transcript. And so we know all about that. That's not something you have to do anything special for. It'll show you if you need a counselor recommendation, any teacher recommendations. The mid-year report is a report that also counselors send. We send that after first semester grades have come up, and all Common App schools will get a copy of your mid-year report automatically. That's not something you have to ask for. The final report is your final transcript. That'll go in the summer after you graduate, and it will only go to the school that you end up enrolling in. So looking at the recommendations, you can kind of see this is where it's going to tell you under the counselor and teacher recommendations that our school is a Naviance school, and so we will send those things directly from the school through Naviance. And but it will also tell you what's required. Here's what I'm going to tell you. We'll come back to the FERPA release in a minute. The counselor rec is not always required. And so don't assume just because you're doing Common App that it's going to require you to do a counselor rec. Teacher recs are also not always required. And you can kind of see down below, it'll say for this school, it says required 2, allowed 2. Allowed is the optional number. And so if a school requires 2 recommendations, but allowed 5, then you can send that many. I don't usually recommend sending that much more. In general, if you want to send 1 additional one, I think that makes sense, but usually sticking around with the required is just fine. This other recommender is also optional based on this college, but this is where you can choose maybe like a youth director or a boss or an internship or someone outside of Blue Valley West. If you have somebody that would be a good recommendation person for you, you can click here, add another, and that's where you are going to enter their personal email and they'll be allowed to write for you. And again, there's a required and allowed listed for each school there. All right, the questions, these are going to be the questions and things you have to fill out for each of the school. This is all school specific. And so for Stanford, you will need to fill out each of these sections in order to get that green check. With regard to the short questions and the short essays, this is a perfect place for you to be as specific as you can about Stanford and why that's a fit for you. So finding moments to talk about yourself, answer their questions, but then also tailor it to the uniqueness of that school. This is the place you want to go because these are going to be things that only go to that school. With regard to recommendations and the FERPA requirement, FERPA stands for the FERPA stands for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And this Privacy Act states that when you turn 18 and once you enroll at a school, you have the right to view your admission documents and anything that was sent on your behalf, your recommendations, things like that. Um, in the admissions process, though, prior to starting, many students decide to waive this right because they feel like it gives the teacher the ability to be as honest and to make that recommendation confidential so that the schools know that teachers are being candid and truthful, and the teachers know that they have the right to be that too. What I will tell you is our teachers do a really good job of writing recommendations, and I don't think this is anything you have to worry about. With that being said, this is your right. You're welcome to ask the counselors about that. But in order to match your accounts, you have to go through this waiver process. So you read the documentation, you get to this page, and you decide that you either decide that you want to waive your right to review your recommendations and your supporting documents once you enroll in college, or you do not waive your right. If you waive your right, that will be confidential. The teachers will see that, the colleges will see that. If you don't waive your right, same thing. Your recommendations won't be as confidential. Teachers and colleges will see that. I will tell you, I don't know that it makes a huge difference, but most students do choose to waive their right in this process. Whatever you choose, it will be good for all of the schools in your list, and you cannot change it once you've signed your name in this process. Once you submit that, you're going to get a green check by recommenders in FERPA, and now you're ready to match that in Naviance so that we can send your documents through Naviance. And when you click match accounts, that's how we match it up so that we can send your recommendations and transcripts to Common Application schools. So now I'm going to explain a little bit of how this interface works, because the schools that the student attends is not going to have access to the transcript or recommendations until the student has pushed submit in the Common App. So for this example, we've got Princeton, our sample school. These are the Common App servers. The servers are going to hold that data, and then the students are going to interface with Common App on the screens that I just showed you, whereas the teachers and the counselors are going to interface via Naviance. And so we'll kind of work on things simultaneously. Students will work on those applications one at a time. Student will push submit, pay the money, and then we'll go ahead and upload. And say, for example, this student asked me to prepare documents for Princeton and Notre Dame and Iowa. They push the button on Princeton. I'm going to go ahead and upload my stuff because it's not school specific to Common App all at once. And so Princeton and Iowa and Notre Dame are going to sit there. And once the student pushes submit, pays the buttons, or pays the money, then those schools will have access to the account. So for example, if they submit on Princeton, Princeton will have access to transcripts and recommendations, but Notre Dame and Iowa won't have access until the student has submitted their application. Next, we want to talk a little bit about recommendations. And so first things first, there's a lot of different ways to do this, and not all schools need the same thing. So it's important to look at each individual school and find out which schools need counselor recommendations, teacher recommendations. Some don't need any, and some need both. Counselors and students or teachers are going to request different information. So your student might need to provide a little bit of information to get them started on their rec. The counselors have a student and a parent survey in Naviance to fill out first. Then we'll meet individually with the student for about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll be ready to start their recommendation. Teachers may request resumes or other things that will help them. And we want the students to ask at least 2 weeks prior to their earliest deadline, because there's about 14 people in the building that write the bulk of the recommendations for all of our students. And so it's really important. They can get backed up in the month of September and October. Lastly, make sure that your student you send a thank you note. You don't need to get a gift card or a gift or anything like that, but a handwritten note in November, December is a really nice thing. A couple of things I want you to think about too with regard to recommendations. Our teachers and counselors write unique letters for each of our students, and it takes time. We don't have a form letter. It's not a quick process because we want that letter to be as unique as you are. So it takes about 1 to 2 hours of uninterrupted time to write them, and we may have 6 or 7 other recommendations to write before we get to yours. So that's why we need some extra time. And it's always important to make that face-to-face contact to ask for that recommendation. It's important that parents don't ask for recommendations, students ask. And always follow up then with an email request in Naviance and a resume or whatever the teacher might need. It's okay if you ask them online first, but make sure that you do that face-to-face contact immediately after you send the email if you can't do the face-to-face first. I hope this process has been helpful for you today. Remember that counselors are available during JAG, and we're available to work one-on-one with students throughout this entire fall to help this college admission cycle be as successful as possible. Thanks for watching.